It's Burdette's turn.
Oh.
Thanks for coming. Welcome to see you. He's got lots of stuff. I'm just gonna sit back here and enjoy it with the rest of you.
Well, this is going to be kind of a demonstration and a little bit of discussion about the phonographs. Can you all hear me? Get my school teaching voice back up. That hasn't been used in a while. To start out with, we're going to cover several different brands, two in particular, Edison and Victor, and some of the history behind these. Edison, I invented the talking machine, the phonograph, which he copyrighted. That's important to remember that. In 1877, there were some other people that were working on a talking machine, but and they had backers. While Edison found out about it, so he kind of got on the stick and started developing his. The first tinfoil phonograph. You've seen pictures where they put aluminum foil and crank it and then back it up and play with the reproducer. Well, when Edison started this, he started quickly, and he said he had a functioning talking machine, and he called it the phonograph. Well, then all the backers for the other guys jumped ship. They, not if Edison has something to do with it, with his own. So anyway, this is kind of one of my little baby pride and joys. There was another company, and while Edison didn't do anything basically until 1888, then he started to produce a functioning home use phonograph, which still took about 10 years to get the thing rolling and get it perfected enough that people would buy it. At the same time, there was a German man by the name of Emil Berliner, and he started making a talking machine. Edison used cylinder, Berliner used disc, like these, or like the little ones up here, the disc machine. And these are shellac. Well, anyway, what happens, Berliner was making the phonograph, and then he decided to sell out to a man by the name of Eldridge Johnson. Eldridge Johnson, the early Victors say Johnson. They don't say Berliner, they don't say Victor, it's Eldridge Johnson. This was a kind of a short run thing. And then also there was another one that I don't have one here of, a Zonophone. Zonophone was a lot like the Victor phonograph, or we'll say the Eldridge Johnson Berliner thing. And anyway, what they did, their machine was a better grade motor, and it was a better deal. So Eldridge Johnson decides to buy out Zonophone, and then they sued him. Copyright infringements, and so that was the downhill of Zonophone. Then when Johnson owned it, they sued. Like I said, they sued him. They took him to court, and they decided that they had to name their talking machines. So they called it the Victor because they were the victors in court. Oh boy, But that was how they did it. That's where the word Victor comes from. Well, anyway, this is an 1890, what do I have, 98, 96?
I don't
98. There's very little difference, but this is the original one. How many of you have seen an RCA Victor record, a 33 1/3 or anything? Do you see the little dog on there with the phonograph? This is the little phonograph, and this is the little dog. This is Nipper. Now, a little story about Nipper. The interesting thing is, there was a man in England, and he did some amateur painting. So in the 1890s, his brother had passed away, and his wife was already dead, so they had some orphan kids and the puppy, and the puppy's name was Nipper. So what he did, he painted a picture. Today, over the years, this has kind of faded into oblivion. You will see the very early pictures of these two combined, and the phonograph and Nipper are sitting on a mahogany flat top casket. You can tell by the shape goes like that and like that. It's flat, and they have the phonograph. They had a phonograph on it, and they also had Nipper, and it was called His Master's Voice. Now, there's another big problem coming with this. The phonograph was not this one. The phonograph was an Edison, like this one. Because Edison, you had a recorder like he has set up over there. You could make your own recordings. Victor, you could not unless you were a recording artist. So that's all kind of, it worked fine with an Edison. So this man by the name of Francis Burdette, who ended up adopting the kids and inheriting Nipper, painted this picture. He took it to the Edison Bell Company in London. They didn't want it. Nah, don't want it. So, okay, he took it home. Then he went to the newly found Victor talking machine company and showed it to them, and they were busy. They said, leave it here, we'll think about it, we'll talk about it, and whatever. So, about a month or two later, they called him. Well, we kind of like this picture, but there's a problem. It's got our competitor's machine on it. It has an Edison. They said, can you paint one of our machines on it? This one. So he went to some friends and borrowed one quick, and right over the top, he painted the other phonograph right over, and they gave him $50 for it, and all rights and privileges to use His Master's Voice. Henceforth, that's why it became known as the Victor machine, their logo, and His Master's Voice. But now that you know the real story, the only way it could be His Master's Voice was if it was a recording artist. It had to be an Edison. Anyway, I'll play this little thing. These are kind of a cute little deal. Now remember, this is really primitive. Come on. There we go. Yesterday I very quickly rebuilt the reproducer. Quick. And the first records were 7-inch, little ones. Then they came out with 8-inch, then 10-inch, then 12-inch. You can't wind it while it's playing, not on these. Let me get this thing back here. I didn't crank it enough. I can't crank it. Anyway.
Pretty good trumpet player there, though.
Yeah, I didn't have it wound enough. Then, anyway, Victor, and on the side here you see the little phonograph with the dog. They got used to that. This is a Victor Monarch Special. In 1904, this was, for a very short period of time, this was Victor's top of the line. Now, what I'm going to do too is play records, and then you can hear kind of your own tone test. Which do you think is better, Victor or Edison? I have my opinion, but we won't go into that yet. Oh, great. Guess what I forgot to do? No? I forgot to get the crank out. Good place to hide crank. Ouch, poke me. There. I think they call that technical difficulties. helps to wind it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oopsie. There we go. Now we'll try this again.
Mm-hmm.
Come on. There. And I think you'll recognize this song.
There's a time in each year that we always hold dear, little summertime. With the birds and the breezes and sweet scented breezes, little summertime. When your day's work is over, then you are in clover, and life is one beautiful rhyme. No trouble annoying, each one is enjoying the good old summertime. In the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, rolling through the shady lane with your baby mine. You hold her hand and see how straight comes out such a good sign. That means you're good to in the good old summertime. You swim in the pool, you play hooky from school, good old summertime. You play ring a rosy with Jim, Kate and Josie, good old summertime. Those days full of pleasure we now fondly treasure when we never thought it was right. To go feeling jelly with sweet brown and berries, good old summertime. In the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, strolling through the shady lanes with your baby man. You hold her hand and she holds yours, and that's a very good sign. That means you're good to in the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, in the good old summertime, strolling through the shady lanes with your baby man. You hold her hand and she holds yours, and that's a very good sign. That means you're good to in the good old summertime.
And make sure you could hit that.
Was that you singing, Burdette?
No, that was not me. No, that didn't happen. And you know, one thing I have to point out to you that's kind of funny, I'll do it on this one here. You see this little yizzy here?
Oh, really?
That's called a tie down, a hold down. For some odd reason, they seem to think that the thing would fly off. It didn't fly off, but you every time you put a record on, you had to put that stupid little thing on there. Now, that was in the good old summertime. Now I will play you the Edison version. Of the same song, but maybe different artists.
And the Edison Military Band.
Oh, no, this is the band version. Someone likes this one better? Yeah, I do too. I never knew what the big fuss about Victor was about. But... See, they had pretty lyrics that Edison home phonograph. Oops. But this would sound a lot better yet if I had a big on it. And that was one of Edison's callbacks. Up until 1907, this is the horn you got with it. Now, Columbia and the other ones had big, pretty flowered horns. I like this one, okay? They had that. And, well, there's not a lot of volume here, and the other one looks pretty, but it tips over too. So, that goes with it.
Why did they go to cylinders?
Huh?
Why did they go to cylinders instead of the flat.
See, Edison originally, when he invented the phonograph, it was the tin foil on the cylinder. See, it had a metal thing, metal disc, cylinder with grooves in it, and then you wrap tin foil around it, put a clip on it, so every time it goes around you get tick, 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 you know, to track record. But that was the very first one. After that, what they did, then they came out with the brown wax records in the late 1890s. Then by 1902, they came out with what they called gold molded. Oh, this was a big deal, you know. They actually covered the master when they made the first master. They would have a gold plated in there. That was supposed to be nice and pure, you know. And so that was how they ran that. Then Edison, in 1907, wait a minute, going here. In 1907, they came out with 4-minute records. They used the same. Now we all call this wax, don't we? The wax records. They're not wax. You know what they really are? You know the formula? It's basically soap.
Yep.
It's a soap, but you can't wash your hands with it. But I mean, it's a soap thing with a hardener in it. So that's how they originally, but everybody calls them wax because the early ones were kind of like that too, and they look like wax, they broke like wax, so that's how that came about. But in 1907, they came out with 4-minute records. Now, the problem with it was Edison used the same wax, we'll call it wax for technicalities here, the same wax mold, formula. But the trouble is, this has 100 grooves an inch. The wax one, the other one playing 4-minute, would be 200 grooves per inch. So you got to squeeze a lot of little grooves in an inch. Well, the trouble was that wall between the grooves was so thin that you could do like that, and the reproducer go like that, and you've got a yet, you just wrecked a record. Well, that didn't work very good. Columbia was making 2-minute records, their competitor. Now, I don't have a box for it here, but what I want to show you, there was another company that made records, there were more of them, and it was called the Lambert. And they made these pretty pink ones, see? So this was a Lambert, but celluloid. You could drop it and it wouldn't break. So Lambert was making these and they sounded wonderful. The only problem with it was Edison and Columbia, they were kind of cutthroat. They kind of basically sued the bejesus out of the Lambert Company into bankruptcy. And then, because they wanted to buy the copyright for the celluloid. So they kept saying, well, it's a bigger hole on this end than on this end. So it fits the mandrel. Well, so does our phonographs. So you're infringing on our copyright for different you know. It was a fight. But anyway, finally, Edison and Columbia sued them into bankruptcy. Then Edison and Columbia made a little under-the-table deal. Edison said, well, okay, since Columbia helped, and Edison and Columbia didn't like each other either, by the way, not even close. They weren't even friends, you know, but it worked that way. So then Columbia came out, this is a 4-minute one, using celluloid. Ouch. But they don't break, and it had a metal band in here and a metal band in here. So it fits on the mandrel. But Columbia had this agreement with Edison. They would make records using celluloid first, 2 and 4 minutes, from 1907 to 1912. Then Edison could use it. So this was their agreement. So that's why you find some 2-minute, some 4-minute indestructibles. And Edison went out of the 2-minute business in 1912. Well, so Columbia kept making 2-minute records until about 1922, something like that, in the early 20s. That's when they finally quit, and they kept making 4-minute longer. And Edison and Columbia both basically went out of the cylinder phonograph business in about 1929. Edison, October, I don't know when Columbia's date was, but then they just kind of closed the door, it's over. Because there was a problem, they started recording records like Victor did, Columbia did, and see the early ones are like this. The record, nothing on the back, one-sided record. Then they figured out how they could put two songs on here. Well, with an Edison, you can't play the inside of the cylinder, so, well, what are we gonna do? So the Columbia advertised heavily, 2 songs for the price of one. And they both cost 35 cents. So you can see where the cylinder market is kind of taking a nosedive. Another reason that they did that happened, Victor, by then, Edison up until 1911 maybe, right in there, he had Victor Herbert. You've heard of songs by Victor Herbert? That was his musical advisor, and Victor Herbert picked out what was going to be made. Okay? Well, Edison thought Victor Herbert was spending too much money on these guys that stood in front of a horn and sang a song. And the older Edison got, he couldn't hear very good, you couldn't reason with him very good, even his own children had an awful time with him. But anyway, so they fired Victor Herbert, and then Edison decided to take over, and he was making the songs that he liked. Yeah, but nobody else liked them. That was a problem. He was born in the 1840s, and he liked the home, heart, and mother type things and the ballads. In the 20s, that was not popular. You wanted dance band. So, and then, like, how many of you have ever heard of Rudolph Valentino? Okay. Well, Valentino died in 26-7. And Victor, I think within 2 days after he died, there was a piece of sheet music you could buy called There's a New Star in Heaven Tonight. In about 4 days, Victor had a record out done by their hot country recording artist, Vernon Dalhart, whose real name was Marion T. Slater, by the way. But he grew up between the towns of Dalhart and Vernon and Dalhart, Texas, so he used those two, and that was his pseudonym. So anyway, they sold a bazillion copies of this thing. There's a new star, da 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 da, and Edison came out with it about 6 months later. Well, you know what that means? The steam is out of it, right? That didn't help. And Victor, in 1924, I didn't bring one of those records, I guess I could have. They started recording phonograph records electrically. And if you see and it has a big scroll label here, it's very pretty. And then right here in the top, there's a little itty bitty raised oval. And if you look real close, it's about that big. It says VE. Now, people that bought the record didn't pay attention to that thing. It's in the lead, you didn't look at it. What that meant, it was electrically recorded, Victor Electric. Then in 1925, they came out with their credenza, and that blew the socks off of anything Edison could think about. It was, oh man, the world of difference. Well, anyway, finally they did talk Edison into doing electrically recorded records, I think late 1927, 28, and then it was back up to par, but a little too late. So that's why Edison basically went out of the phonograph business. Toward the end in the factory, and as far as the cylinders go, and the diamond discs because of the problems, as far as the cylinder records went, the factory was sending out about 100 records a week, cylinder. You can't run a factory with several hundred people and selling 100 records at 35 cents. You see what I mean? It was like my friend in Mason City said, it's circling the drain. So that was the end of it, But anyway, this is what have I not played? Okay. This one. This is one of my pride and joys, and I don't want to brag, but I am very proud of it. I have 3 of these. They were made from November of 1907 till January of 1908, and it's called the Edison Ideal. It was their top-of-the-line machine, pretty, fancy, oxidized, oh boy. Basically what it amounts to is an overpriced Edison Triumph, but we won't say that. We might hurt Edison's feelings. So anyway, but that's what it is. And anyway, in January of 1908, there was a little mom and pop organization that was making talking machines. Kind of like something like a Victor, you know, little cheap, windy thing. And they called it the Ideal Phonograph. Well, they had the nerve to sue Edison. Now that took guts to sue Thomas Alva Edison. Rather than making a big court litigation, and here we go, you know, Edison just decided to change the name in January of 1908 to the Edison Idealia. They added an IA behind it. So then it was all legal. But anyway, this is one of the 157 that came out with the ID tag of Ideal. I have no idea what I've got on here. I put it on earlier. Whoop, back it up. This is I'm going to dedicate to Selma. Years ago, when I started collecting phonographs, and folks are alive, I belonged to the Michigan Antique Phonograph Society, and they contacted me, people that remembered the first time around, you know, and that was the article on the cover of the Michigan Antique Phonograph Society with my mother and her Amarola 30. Grandpa and Grandma Kaiser bought that at T.T. Beecroft, the bakery, in Wellsburg in 1916. And what it tells you, the story there, his dealership was not like a big city dealership where it was the whole store window and, you know, really pretty. They had the bakery in the back where they made the bread and the rolls and things. And then you'd come, the store stood this way. So you go into the front was a display, then there was a side hall. You'd go down, the next room was the phonograph dealership. That's it. And what Mom said what that amounted to was a bulb hanging on a cord, about a 25-watt bulb. There was a library table in the middle of the room, a chair, and a bunch of crates of records, and have at it, guys. That was kind of the dealership. And then the next room was the bakery where they baked the bread. So you would go to town on Wednesday and Saturday night, traditionally. And Mom would always go down to Mr. Beecroft, to the dealership, And of course, he knew all the kids in town. So she would go down to the room, turn the light on, pull the pull chain or whatever, and look at the crates of new records that came in. Well, now remember, we didn't have in those days a radio. We had no TV. If there was a song that came out, you didn't know what it was just by the title, did you? You wouldn't know. So you could play it on the machine if you liked it, but to the day Mom died, she never wanted to play a different machine. She wanted her 30, and that's the one that she played. Anyway, I had a great big fancy expensive opera with a wood horn standing on the TV, and I'd come home with a box of records and I'd clean them and catalog them, and then Mom would say, I want to look. She enjoyed that. So she'd go through, oh, that's a pretty song. I want that. So she got her first choice out of anything. And anyway, I said, Mom, why don't you play it on the opera? It sounds a whole lot better than an Amarola 30. No, I want mine. Right, So that's how she did it. But what she would also do at the dealership, records by that time cost 35 cents. So she would go back there and maybe pick one or two records out, and she would go up to the counter where Beecroft was, and he would write the record number down and put like Mary Kaiser behind it, and she'd take them home. Then you played them at home on her phonograph, and on Saturday when they went back to town, she'd either give him the 35 cents, he'd cross it off, and if she didn't like a song, she'd give the record back. But Mom always said, he didn't do that with all the kids. You wouldn't get your records back. But anyway, she was very, very proud of that story.
What year was that?
16.
16?
1916.
1916.
Because she had one, they had one, Great Aunt Sarah had one, Great Grandpa and Grandma Alduff had one, all the same. See, by that time, all of the things like this, like that, they were all obsolete. After the Edison fire in 1914, they really cut it down as to the different models. It was getting too confusing. You could have an Amarola 8, an 8A, an 8B, an 8C. Oh, good Lord. Just a little variation in the cabinet, and this got to be way, way too much to handle. So then after the 1914 fire, he said, okay, they had three models, a 30, 50, and a 75. 30 costs $30, 50 costs $50, and the 75 costs $75. That's your choice, folks. So that's how they did that. In 2 years ago, we went to Ontario. No. Where did we go? Vancouver, thank you. Age, things slip. We went to Vancouver, and they had a phonograph there, one of those things like you dream of one of these. But above that is the one that, no, you will never see. I have seen in real life two, one in a basket case and one a collector in Minnesota has, and I got to look at it. It was the basic 1912, the Edison Schoolhouse Opera. And what that is like the fancy one in the house that I collect with the wooden horn. This thing was cast iron. You could beat that sucker with a ball-peen hammer. It was the same mechanism, only it didn't have, it had the metal elbow, but it had a tin horn, not the pretty wooden ones with kids, that didn't work. Well, anyway, there was one for sale, and the Edison Schoolhouse did not sell. It just didn't. I don't know why. Victor, well, I kind of do why. Victor came out with a ton of records, exercise records, language records, and Victor always did more of the classical music, like Caruso, Gallicucci, Schumann, Heinck, Madame Melba. They did all of that. Edison did more the rural, the type of things like the Billy Murray, the cutesy ones, Will Oakland, the countertenor, what's his name, Walter Van Brunt, things like that. And they had the comedies like Uncle Josh Buys an Automobile, which is kind of funny. and they had all those things where Victor, they did that too, but they really pushed classical music. You could get from your dealership a book this thick, and it was all different arias, different operas, with the top named artists recording them. Well, we've all heard of Caruso, right? Well, Caruso was extremely arrogant. I mean, he was Caruso. He came to New York, or to West Orange, New Jersey, and requested an audience with Mr. Edison. Uh-oh, this isn't gonna go good. You could just tell. So anyway, Edison asked him in, they talk, and with his arrogant attitude, he said he would consider making sound recordings for Edison. He would consider that. Edison said, no, your voice hurts my ears. That was the end of Caruso. So you'll never find a Caruso on an Edison cylinder. He kind of, get out of here. You know, that was kind of the deal. But he had he had some very good dance bands in the 20s. One of them, for example, was the B.A. Rolfe, Golden Gate, Gold Ketty was Victor. And he would make all of these things, and then they, in the mid-20s, about 22, they came out with a very nasty thing. It's called a radio. Well, you know what that did to phonograph sales. Why pay for it when you turn the radio on? Well, this went on, and then Edison was notorious for not paying a lot of money for recording artists. His line was, they're worth how much? You know, I'm not going to pay that. So you would get not necessarily the best of the classical artists. He had some good ones. He had Christine Miller, Thomas Chalmers, they were good. And even the very early, the first of the Royal Purple, they were purple-colored records. That was their classical. Because Victor came out with a red label, that was their red seal, that was their records that cost $1 and not 75 cents, see? You had to pay extra for Caruso. Well, what are you going to do? You can't put a paper label on a cylinder record, so they colored the whole record. It was purple. Very pretty. Okay, there's 78 of them, different ones. I have the full set of all of the classical series. But the very first 6 were by an Italian by the name of Alessandro Banci. Now, Banci was also very good, but not quite Caruso status. You know how that goes. And the other thing, in the 20s, what happened, a nasty little thing called exclusive contracts. If you, Mary, if you record for me on cylinder, you sign a contract. You don't go tiptoeing across the street and sing for Victor or Columbia. So this caused a big rift. That's why toward the end, Edison had B.A. Rolfe, that was his hot one, and he was paying him $1,000 a session to keep him. Well, you had to do something, right, to keep it afloat. But anyway, Vernon Dalhart, the man I told you about from Marion T. Slater, he was Edison's most popular about every other record that came out in the catalog from 27, 28, 29 till it was done in October, was a Dalhart record, or they had 4 or 5 in a row. Now, Dalhart was the type of person that liked this really twangy, he's noted as the first country western singer. For example, A Handful of Earth from Mother's Grave, the record that they had more doggone trains, record the 96, 97, I don't know, they had the 10, 15, they had all these type things like a little rosewood casket, you know, they were just tear-jerking hurt, but that was popular at that time. Well, anyway, what Dalhart did, he kind of pulled a fast one on him. He ended up, he could use Vernon Dalhart on Victor, or excuse me, on Edison. And then Edison made an arrangement with Dalhart to sing on Edison, and that cost Edison some money, you know, to get him. But what he did that was interesting, he went to all the dime store records, Grey Gill, Cameo, all of those, And what he would do, he had 150 different pseudonames. So he was recording under somebody. The only one that I had a friend that passed away, but he was an expert on Vernon Dalhart, and the only one I remember him telling me was Bob White. If you see a Bob White, that's Vernon Dalhart. So, I mean, he had a whole string of them. But anyway, what happened with Dalhart, then in the later 20s, with this exclusive contract, now there might have been a way about this, but there was a man by the name of Carson Robinson. Carson Robinson grew up in the hills in Tennessee, you know, down south. And he knew from old people all of these, like the Little Rosewood Casket and all of these tear-jerking hurts. So what happened, it became Dalhart and Robinson. They paired the two together. Dalhart did the singing. Robinson came up with the material. Okay? This was a good deal, right? Then Dalhart thought he was not getting along, as he put it, fast enough in his career. Well, he's already on top. How much further are you going to go? You know? So, but anyway, what he did, he decided to get rid of Carson Robbins. That lasted until the Book of Songs ran out. And then things then it became Dalhart and Company. But he didn't have the stuff. It was remaking somebody else's stuff. And Vernon Dalhart died as a night clerk in a bad part of town hotel in New York. That's what happened to the great Vernon Dalhart in 1949. Anyway, now it's York's part.
Okay, yes. One of the very fun things, actually, what you can do with an Edison phonograph is not just listening to music, but it's also to make home recordings with that. Okay. So as part of the demonstration today, we're going to show you how to make an Edison record. So if you would like to listen to yourself from an Edison record, I would gladly invite you maybe to say your name into the phonograph horn, and we engrave your name on a record. So you can know how it sounds.
They're cutting a master, just like at Edison.
So we're cutting a master, you know. So actually, and for that purpose, so we brought an Edison home phonograph, and Burdette rebuilt this phonograph actually. So it's very well balanced. So you have to have a really good functioning phonograph for that. Which is really balanced, otherwise you get all of these side effects in it. Problems. For that purpose, we use a special recording horn for that, which actually came out of a recording studio, and in opposite to make it out of tin, this is paper mache, because it resonates better with a recorder on it. In the phonograph right now is a so-called Edison recorder, but has a recording needle on it, made out of sapphire, and this is one of these wax record or soap records.
Thank you.
So these soap records, and this record was made by a friend of mine in England, Paul Morris. He's remaking still phonograph records. So pretty much the reason why we can record with that is because it has a smooth walk here with the record, and then to make a recording, one has to stand right in front of the horn, has to talk as loud as possible, really nice and loud and clear. So that gives you a little bit the idea how it was in early 1900 to make a recording. So if you're Billy Murray or if you're Vernon Dalhart, you would stay in front of a phonograph like this, and this is how all these records were actually made. Up to the age of gold molded records, many records were actually handmade. So the early Brown records, for example, when you get one of these really rare ones, you may have a chance to get a real recording from that artist in your hand. And also if you are a recording artist, and you are very popular, then it meant, well, let's go to the Edison studios. How many recordings do I have today? 200. So you have to sing the same song 200 times in the phonograph.
That got old.
That got old, so with that. And the recording engineer would be really mad if you messed it up, because what they would have, they had several of these phonographs somehow synchronized with a phonograph horn, so you could actually make a couple of them at once. So if you sneeze in the middle of your record, or you make fun of the other recording artist, then it would be on 100 records of that. So for that, So I'm going to demonstrate that here actually how to make a recording. So I'm just going to talk something in. If you have an interest, you would like to listen to yourself on an Edison record, I would like to invite you. Maybe we can arrange that somehow that you can come in front and we can record your on that horn. And then we make sure we keep that record so in 100 years with the Wellsport Historical Society we have you recorded on an Edison record, you know, so actually with that, and we still have the phonograph over there to listen to you in 100 years, you know, so for that purpose, so I'm going to, I go first and then make a demonstration for that, and then after that I let some of the guests here make a recording out of it here. Okay, so pretty much turn on the phonograph, then and you will hear a shaving noise actually from making the recording. So then I need to set down the stylus and then it engraves. Welcome to the Wellsport Historical Society. Today we are presenting Burdette E. Walters with his Edison phonograph collection. So what happened now is
Now show them the swerve.
Yep.
That's a fancy word for shavings.
So now we made a groove on here.
See the white
On
stuff?
here. So there's a little bit white dust on it, actually. And then down here in the phonograph is actually the little bit of wax on it. See? So not excellent, but you know. So now that's professional clean record. So and now we made a record. Now the nice thing is, since we have so many fabulous phonographs here, I can just use one of Burdette's phonographs actually to play it back. So
why don't we use this one? It's loud. This horn
Yep.
bigger.
can you switch it to 2 minutes?
It is.
Okay. So it's on 2 minutes, right?
I think it's, yeah, I played it 2 minutes.
Welcome to the Wellsport Historical Society. Today we are presenting Burdette E. Walters with his Edison phonograph collection.
That was big entertainment. The neighbors would come over.
So you could do this at home. if you
Yes.
did it right.
Yeah, you had, and see the early machines like the home Model A, Model B, that's the suitcase, then comes A and his is a B, and that was about it. They would come with a recorder with it, and a chip brush, oil can, some blanks, record, you could buy kits, you could get like 12 records, 24, 36, 48, you know, and you picked out the records you wanted, and this was your kit for X number of dollars.
Absolutely. So yeah, they absolutely also mentioned with that. The next thing, but also people did. There was a program with Edison. They would send out agents around the countryside and see if there are singers out there. You know, so there are some Western country singers and some local people. It's also an interesting thing. So there's a huge collection of really famous people what Edison recorded, from the Pope to the Queen of England to Bismarck, the Kaiser, the Nicholas Tsar of Russia, and many times also remaining of Native American tribes. You know, so actually, so dances, rain dances, and things, they would actually be recorded with that. And this is the reason why we still have today some of their dances, some of their folk songs recorded and preserved today. So pretty much, since we have that here, and you know, now I have that big question. It reminds me like in a college class. Would like somebody yell in the horn and say their name and say hello. Not everybody at once.
I have a question though.
Yes.
When you spoke into that too,
Mhm.
you really upped the volume.
Yes.
So I'm thinking that if we had someone that would like to sing a song, they'd have to sing at double the volume that they usually do.
Yes, they would have to sing it very
that
loud
would take
and
a little.
clear. Very volume in it, but.
Can I interrupt a second?
After a breath
Yes,
one,
absolutely.
getting that done.
For, now, in the 1940s, there's a magazine called Hobbies. Some of you have maybe seen it. There used to be a man that wrote an article whenever it came out, about old recording artists. And at that time, in the 40s, Bing Crosby was a pretty big deal. And he wrote a letter to Hobbies magazine, a letter to the editor, and he made fun of the old-time recording artists. Well, one of my favorite recording artists is a countertenor that's loud and clear. And his name was Will Oakland. Real name was Herman Hendricks. But anyway, he wrote a rebuttal back, a reply. And he said, well, he admired Mr. Crosby for his 11 million copies of White Christmas. But, he said, when we recorded records, we had to stand in front of the horn, and what we put in is what came out, and there were no electronics playing tricks for us to do this. You had to know what you were doing. And he said Mr. Crosby had a way to go to keep up with Will Oakland's record of 22 million copies of Silver Threads Among the Gold. Ouch!
You could try
No,
singing
but
something
if-
in there.
This is like when you're having a conversation and someone speaks real loud and stuff like, it's irritating. Yeah, so that affects the quality too. of it.
Oh yeah, and sometimes if it's too loud, you can get a buzz. The little recorder diaphragm won't take it. You know, it's not happy when it does that.
Try singing something in there. You can do Ain't She Sweet.
You could
You're
record
coming
a
down the street.
an early Christmas message.
Well, I think we have a Pastor Zimmerman here who sings very nicely. I bet he's got something memorized.
He's trying to think of something.
Bruce, I hear the curtain coming down with the pulleys. I think you're fine.
There we go.
You gotta kind of sing it.
See, it was meant to be that you sit here on that position.
Let me just think a minute.
Sure. Yeah.
Words now, yeah.
Oh.
You mean Ain't She Sweet?
Yeah.
Or something? So you're coming down the street and I ask you very
Oh, yeah,
confidentially.
okay, okay.
And then so very close to the horn, put the face as close as you can to the horn. Very close, closer, a little closer. Sorry, closer.
And loud.
And then
Loud and enunciate.
very loud, and here we
No
go.
pressure.
No. Ain't she sweet? See her coming down the street. Now I ask you very confidentially, ain't she sweet? Ain't she nice? Look her over once or twice. Now I ask you very confidentially, ain't she nice? Just cast your eye in her direction. Oh me, oh my, ain't that perfection? Well, I repeat, ain't she kinda neat and sweet? Now I ask you very confidentially, ain't she sweet? Hey! Nice! I changed the words a little. Time him up! I really should have introduced myself to that.
Yeah.
You have to do it again.
Bruce, the record company is calling you tomorrow.
If it doesn't sound good, then we can give him somebody else's name.
I thought maybe it would be at the top of the list of 12, you know.
Yeah, top 12.
Here we go.
That sounded really good.
That did. Very good.
So they,
If you'd had your ukulele along,
Yeah,
you'd been
that's-
all set.
That's what I need, yeah.
Sit down one more time.
Ain't she sweet? See her coming down the street. Now I ask you very confidentially, ain't she sweet? Ain't she nice? Look her over once or twice. Now I ask you very confidentially, ain't she nice? Just cast your eye in her direction. Oh me, oh my, ain't that perfection? Well, I repeat, ain't you kinda neat and sweet? Now I ask you very confidentially, ain't she sweet?
It goes back to the 20s. Back to the 20s.
A Star is Born.
Well, the Edison record company offers you a recording contract for 5 cents per record.
Very good.
Big spenders, huh?
Good job, sir.
I know at home I've got, over the years I bought phonographs, records, you know, that type of thing. And I bought one from an older couple once in Webster City. And they said, well, you'll find some records in there. And my dad made those. So I've never shaved them, I just leave it, you know. Dad and an aunt would sing. See, Edison had a cylinder record, advertising record that came out in 1906. And with this 1906 record, it would say, you can hear the voice of those that have gone before. Yeah, they were playing it, you know. And it can play music, you can sing. It was just a fantastic little advertising, and Byron G. Harlan made it. I think somewhere I have one, but I don't know where.
I don't know if I'd like that.
I get forgetful where I put them. And when you get thousands of them, you know. I always say to York, you can do whatever, anything you want to with it, but please put it back where it was so I might remember, you know, if I want to find it back. Eyesight's failing, record titles get dim, and I got my little flashlight in the record drawer going.
Where did RCA Victor?
Oh, I didn't tell you. The Victor Talking Machine Company. Now remember, that's not a phonograph. Phonograph was a copyrighted word by only Edison. Everything else was a talking machine. Otherwise you get sued. You know, that's how that worked. So in 1929, the Victor Talking Machine Company was bought out by the upcoming Radio Corporation of America. Henceforth, RCA Victor. They just kept it that way.
To eventually make these go away and
Yeah, they bought out all the records inventory, the record stock, the artists and everything, and Victor Talking Machine Company was nothing to sneeze at. Neither was Edison or Columbia, but they just merged. So they merged the two and called it RCA Victor. That was 29.
Were you able to have your mom's 30, or what have you talked about?
Yeah, that one.
Is that this one?
No, that on the picture that I have that.
You
machine.
have that at home.
And we made a couple of cylinder records on like this. Mom recorded her confirmation piece, Ich bin getauft auf deinen Namen, Gott Vater, Sohn und Heiligen Geist, you know. And her and I would sing, Gott ist die Liebe und Jesus nimmt die Sünde an, things like that from her childhood. So I have those. It's kind of fun to listen to once in a while.
So you talked about going to Michigan. Is that one of the centers of?
There was the Michigan Antique Phonograph Society, but they now merged with California. So instead of Michigan maps, it became CAPS, C-A-P-S. But Stanton's auction is coming up in, September 1st. And I thought about going, but just don't quite feel up to it, to be honest with you. I went in May, Jorgen, Barrett and I went, and they have twice a year, strictly a phonograph auction. You'll see this type of thing for 3 days, one after the other. And it's a fun place to go. Like, I was very fortunate getting this one this year. And then the funny part of it was there was a collector from California. Of course, I'm heavy on the water pills. And when you gotta go, you gotta go. There is no maybe about it. And this machine was coming up, and I didn't have one of those. I have a Triumph. Well, there's the early one with the drawer. That one, then there's A, B. I didn't have a C, D, E, F, and G. I didn't have a G. And of course, you want one of the whole, one of each. Well, I'd already bought the G, so I was just tickled, pink. That's the hard one to get. But the C, there's 11 of those known. And I thought, this is gonna cost money, But anyway, I was sitting there kind of doing the pee-pee dance. I hope you're not recording that. Well, anyway, you can cut that, maybe. So anyway, what happened? I just said to Barry, there is no, So I'm out of there. Just as I went to the bathroom, they picked up that C and sold it. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was sick. Well, I knew who bought it, a big California dealer. So I walked over there, and since we're being recorded, I won't say the name. But anyway, I walked over there, and I said, hey, that's it, I on water pills, I had to go. Would you be interested in selling that machine? I thought, this is going to get worse, because he knows what it is. And he said, well, we get more money for them in California. Well, I know that. But I said, what do you want for it? And he told me, out of my pocket. And you know what? He thought it was a D, not a C. D's are common as tomorrow. And I said to Baron, get it out of here. I paid for it, take it to the truck, get it out of here. So I came home extremely happy. And then that was the model that was very short-lived, and they had problems. They did something really, really stupid. On steel and aluminum are not friends. That doesn't work together. They corrode. Well, they made a bearing in there, the main mandrel bearing, out of aluminum. And, no, not aluminum, copper. It was copper. Something anyway. And I don't care. Anyway, I got home and I played it, and I tried it there before they sold it, to just let it, without a record on it, let it run through, to make sure everything's working. And I got home and I talked to my friend in Colorado that has one, and he said, how's your bushing? How's your bearing? And I go, why? He said, they corrode and they don't interact. And usually the whole feed screw, that's this thing back here with the little tiny hair-like grooves on it, that corrodes and it just eats at it, and then it doesn't track. Well, getting a part for a C is like non-existent. I said, oh crap. I said, well, it plays. And he said, send me a picture of it. So I did. And he said, Burdette, I hate to tell you this, but that thing is running on corrosion. And it'll play, but it's running on corrosion. I said, now what? He said, well, he's a machinist. He said, well, I made one for mine, I can make one for yours. So he said, take the shaft and the whole shebang out and send it to me. And about 2 weeks later, I got this beautiful thing with a bronze bushing that is not going to do that again. So that was lucky.
It was a bronze bushing?
I think it's bronze he used. Bronze or brass. One of those two does not work with steel. Or is it copper?
Copper doesn't work with steel.
That's the one it was. That's what Edison used. Why they did that, I don't know.
I don't know why we use bronze. That's the next to copper.
Yeah, but bronze usually works too. But Anyway, it'll last as long as I live. So are there any other questions? Hope you found it entertaining.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the car in front of us is a 1915 Ford Model T, and Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, they were big friends. They would actually go on camping tours, and many times, if you start collecting Edison phonographs, you just have to have a Ford Model T, you know. So if you down the line get an Edison phonograph, after a while you will have also a Ford Model T. The interesting thing is with Model Ts and Edison phonographs, mechanically they are very much related. A phonograph has a 2 and 4 minute changer for record speed. A Ford Model T has a low speed and high speed. And the gears inside are very similar to changing this mechanism with an Edison phonograph. So you can see there's a lot of engineering in phonographs that made it into automobiles, you know. So and I thought that would be a great sign to advertise for that event.